Tonight, showdown on the Rio Grande while Biden and Trump visit the border to blame each other.
A very dangerous border. We're going to take care of it.
We expose the shockingly lax system allowing violent criminals into America unchecked. Why the Border Patrol relies on the honor system.
He doesn't have a right to be in his country.
What? But that has nothing to do with the fact that he was a drunk.
He should have been deported.
Why 20 years later, we're still having the same debate about sanctuary cities. Airdrop charade. The White House reportedly plans airdrops over Gaza to placate the Hamas wing of Congress.
You're threatening literally our democracy.
Will throwing Israel under the bus save the Biden presidency? Silenced.
No, I think maybe we should stop this interview. You sound like you're looking for an attack. I think we're good.
The law professor who wants to save us from disinformation. Who decides what's true in her brave new world? And boys to men.
They found out I was conservative and they said, okay, you're completely going against what we believe. Like the whole school is very liberal. And I guess they just kind of pushed me away. America's young men turn to the right. How forced wokeness on race and transgenders is backfiring. All right, we start with breaking news. The presidential split screen just ended. Former President Trump, President Biden wrapped up their trips to the border with predictable statements. We're going to get to the presidential politics of all of this in a minute. Welcome to the fairest show on television. First tonight, providing sanctuary and how America's mind about that is changing. Yes, there is the issue on the border and what to do about the border itself. That's one issue. But how we treat illegal immigrants already here is arguably a far more important point, especially when it comes to sanctuary cities. And there are a lot of them, probably one near you. There are 150 sanctuary counties across 12 states, coast to coast. Their policy is to not comply with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE. That means an illegal immigrant who the federal government would deport is instead released after arrest. These cities and counties quite literally thumb their nose at federal law enforcement and often let dangerous and violent illegal immigrants back on the street over and over and over again. To be clear, these are people who the feds want to deport. These aren't just any illegal immigrants getting let out of jail. These are people the federal government have already said should be deported. They are arrested for some other crime, and because they are in a sanctuary city, they are released. The federal government is never made aware that these cities or states have in their custody a really bad person. Of course, it's not a new debate. It's been going on for 20 plus years. Like this debate between Bill O'Reilly and Geraldo Rivera over an illegal immigrant who allegedly killed someone drunk driving.
He didn't commit a felony.
He doesn't have a right to be in his country.
What? But that has nothing to do with the fact that he was a drunk.
He should have been deported. He should have been deported, and this mayor and a police chief didn't deport him.
Bill and Geraldo will be with us next week to continue that debate, but now 20 years later, Laken Riley's death is yet another preventable crime, another preventable death. The suspect in her death, Jose Ibarria, lived with 4 to 5 other illegal immigrants in a single bedroom near one of the largest college campuses in the country. It is no surprise nor a coincidence that he and other illegal immigrants picked Athens, Georgia. Athens, Clark, Georgia, the county there, is a sanctuary county. Police cited Ibarra at one point, but he later walked free. His brother was also arrested twice and walked free as well. He even used a fake green card in the process. A spokesperson for ICE confirmed to NewsNation that Diego Ibarra had ICE detainers, but the Athens Clark Police Department did not honor them, as we told you what a sanctuary city does. So why is this done, that law enforcement thumbs its nose at federal law enforcement? Well, the sheriff there in Athens, Georgia, explained why a couple of years ago.
It is not my intention when elect the sheriff to cooperate with those detainers. We can't help with a culture of fear in the community and expect the citizens to respond and help us in situations.
It's interesting that he used the word citizens, but we'll get to that a little later. Laken Riley lived in Athens, Georgia, hundreds of miles from the border. but now ground zero for the immigration debate, or at least the sanctuary city debate. Her murder has a lot of folks in a very liberal college town rethinking how they look at giving illegal immigrants get-out-of-jail-free cards. NewsNation's Alex Capriello starts our coverage from Athens, Georgia this evening. Hi, Alex.
Hey there, Leland.
Give us a sense as you're talking to folks. Did they really understand what it meant to be a sanctuary city? And now that they've seen the results, is their feelings changing?
Yeah, I think actually that press conference yesterday really struck a chord because it caught the attention of so many people who live here in Athens, Clark County, because they saw the uproar that the people that were informed actually lifted to their mayor and to their city leaders. And so it kind of struck a chord with people. When you ask students here, I think really their heart is in sympathy for Laken Riley and her family. They still feel this huge burden that's overwhelming this campus of her death. But every day, other citizens living here in Athens, living in Georgia, are realizing and recognizing the potential threat that undocumented immigrants who maybe have a criminal history that aren't deported actually pose to their community. Look no further than the two brothers, Jose and Diego Ibarra, who, as you mentioned, were cited, were jailed on several instances in 2022 and 2023, but were let right back out into the community. And we know how that ended up with Jose Ibarra, now accused of murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and all sorts of other deep and dark felonies. I had a chance to ask many people about this today. Here were some of their responses, and you'll recognize the diversity of opinion between all these demographics. Take a listen.
I work around a lot of immigrants, and they're some of the finest, hardest working, smartest people I've ever been around, but they've done it through the proper channels. And I would prefer to see everyone do that through the proper channels. I think they ought to have a door open to them to be here, but I think they ought to walk through the proper door.
I mean, I've heard all the immigration talks, but I really don't think that has anything to do with it. I think it's more about men committing violence against women. And, I mean, for all we know, it could have been someone who was a citizen. I don't really think his immigration status has anything to do with it.
Had they done what they were supposed to do and followed the law, there's a chance this wouldn't have happened. There's a much greater chance that this should never happen.
I mean, a lot of people come here for better opportunities and don't commit crimes. But if somebody comes here and is committing crimes, it's really like there's no need for them to be here if they're killing people.
And I want to make it, extremely clear that when I asked the ICE spokesperson about Athens and Clark County in specific, he told me that for years, this local law enforcement really has not honored their detainment policies and the deportation policies that ICE wants to administer. So it's very clear, while the mayor may not believe that this is a sanctuary city, certainly the law enforcement here isn't necessarily cooperating with the standards that ICE and other federal authorities want to set.
Yeah, you really have to think to yourself whether that's going to change in light of this. Obviously, yesterday's meeting was the beginning, not the end of the conversation. We know Laken Riley's funeral is tomorrow. Give us a sense, if you will, how she's going to be remembered. Have we heard from her family where that part of the story is going?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, just learning a lot about Laken Riley, it's really opened my eyes to just how central of a figure she was within her many communities. Right here at the University of Georgia, at Augusta University School of Medicine, she really made an impact on her friends, her family. I spoke to one guy here who knew her from her hometown in Woodstock, which is about 2 hours to the west from where I'm currently standing. And he said the very same thing, that she was a light in that community. She was active in tennis. She was an active member of her church. She went on mission trips. And so the family is asking for privacy for tomorrow's funeral. We won't be allowed to go into the church. We are allowed to be outside because we feel like it's important to really lift her up, because while this is become a greater conversation about federal law enforcement and immigration reform, we can't forget that there is one young woman who was tragically murdered here, and she meant so much to the people who loved her. And so we certainly want to be there to lift up her life and provide a proper tribute.
Yeah, well, tragically, brutally murdered as well. She was going to be a nurse, which speaks to someone who has a kind and loving heart in a way that most of us can only imagine. Alex, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Today, former President Trump said he talked to Laken Riley's parents. At least so far as we know, President Biden has not. That distinction between the two men was on display when they went to the border today.
The majority of Democrats and Republicans in both houses support this legislation until someone came along and said, don't do that, it'll benefit the incumbent.
But this is a Joe Biden invasion. This is a Biden invasion over the past 3 years. I call him Crooked Joe because he's crooked. He's a terrible president.
NewsNation correspondent Allie Bradley with us now from Eagle Pass, Texas. Allie, sunset there. Give us a sense, when you're talking to people and you've covered the border now for years, you're there, do people care who's to blame for it, or they just want it fixed?
You know, we actually heard from a woman who is the wife of a Border Patrol agent, and she said that it's Joe Biden's fault that her husband, a Border Patrol agent, feels unsafe every day. Other residents down here, yeah, they want it fixed, Leland. They don't really care who's to blame, but most of them will say that it was more secure under former President Trump, that they weren't dealing with hundreds of thousands of people coming across the border and, of course, impacting their communities. So we do see more people along the southern border that I've talked to over the last nearly 3 years say that it was more secure under former President Trump, and that was all undone by current President Biden and his administration. We know day one, there was a slew of executive orders that he signed off on, literally undoing things that President Trump had put into place, like building the wall, Leland. So a lot of people want those measures and those policies back in place.
Yeah, remain in Mexico, migrant protection protocols, on and on and on. Allie, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Coming up next, the law professor who believes the First Amendment can be America's Achilles heel. Is there a new push to limit free speech in the name of safety? Huh. Does this mean we have like a disinformation court?
No. I think maybe we should stop this interview. You sound like you're looking for an attack. I think we're good. I guess I misunderstood.
I think I'm just trying to ask about your book, ma'am. And the White House may soon use American C-17s to airdrop food to Gazans. The real reason behind a very expensive photo op that has nothing to do with starving Gazans. You can't trust anyone or anything anymore. That's, of course, why you watch On Balance. We're glad you do. Just take what Google recently did, our go-to search engine for everything. Think about how many times you tell someone to just Google it. Well, a few weeks ago, they launched an AI image generator called Gemini. And as we've told you, if you searched for Nazis, it gave you images of Asian women and black men in German military uniforms because they wanted to be inclusive, not historically accurate. If you asked for an image of the founding fathers, you got this. So if you can't trust Google, what can you trust? Barbara McQuaid, author of Attack from Within, How Disinformation is Sabotaging America, professor of law at the University of Michigan, is with us. Thank you very much. It's good to see you. Congrats on the book. I'm fascinated just by the title. Who decides in your world, in your mind, in what you hope to help, what disinformation is?
Well, I think all of us have a responsibility to look to evidence, data, statistics before we reach conclusions about what is factual and what is not. You know, my background is as a criminal prosecutor. I prosecuted crimes. And before a fact could be deemed true, there had to be attribution for that fact. Just like in journalism, you don't just say things, you attribute it to a source. And in the same way, in court, we use evidence, testimony, documents, records.
So does this mean we have like a disinformation court?
No. I think maybe we should stop this interview. You sound like you're looking for an attack. I think we're good. I guess I misunderstood.
I think I'm just trying to ask about your book, ma'am.
I'm just
trying to figure out. The title of your book. The title of your book is "Disinformation is Sabotaging America." Who decides what is and is not disinformation?
We do based on facts and evidence. Okay. And it is. I'm not proposing a disinformation court, but there is this idea that people want to suggest there's no such thing as facts. There's no such thing as truth. Okay. Because if there are no facts and no truth, I can call everything that's inconvenient fake news, and I can get away with anything. And I think if we are to have a country based on integrity and facts and reach conclusions, we have to base those things on facts. Now, who is the arbiter of facts? I guess ultimately that is the court of public opinion, but we should reach those conclusions based on evidence and data, and not just because someone said something and they to deem it to be false.
Okay, so I think, in the law you often take things to the extreme. I'm not a lawyer, but I think about when, for example, Hunter Biden's laptop was called disinformation. It's later now been found out to be true. So was that sabotaging America? How do we deal with things that appear to be disinformation, or people would tell you is disinformation that is not?
Yeah, so we really need to discern facts and from fiction and legal conclusions. With regard to the Hunter Biden laptop, for example, I think it has been determined that much of the email and content that was on that laptop was genuine. But to this day, there has not been a conclusion that it was his laptop. And so if you go to some of the websites that do work to debunk false claims, there's one called politifact.com, there's one called factcheck.org, there's another called Snopes, nonpartisan efforts to present what is actually factually...
Really? They're nonpartisan, you think?
I'm sorry?
You really think they're nonpartisan?
I think they endeavor to do their best to present facts. And what they do, Leland, let me explain what they do. They attribute the facts that have been demonstrated. Rather than wild conclusions, they say, here's what we know and how we know it, and here's what we don't know. And so, people will take one grain of truth and then spin it into something larger than it is. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to try to look at what are the actual facts, so that we can work together to solve problems instead
of
with it. But you make you're doing right now.
I don't think I'm trying to play gotcha. I'm just trying to ask a couple of questions here. And I think your book is important because it's something that people are talking about ways to change laws. I know you've suggested possibly changing the First Amendment in one way or another to protect people from... Well, that's what you said last night.
Have you read the book?
No, I haven't. I'm just going off what you said last night.
That explains your lack of knowledge of what I say in the book. I absolutely don't say anything about changing the First Amendment. What I say is we can enact a number of legal regulations with social media that comply with the First Amendment. For example, there are algorithms on social media that generate outrage and push us toward content that encourage us to be outraged in an effort to keep us on those platforms. We know that because a Facebook whistleblower named Frances Haugen testified about that.
Okay, I was going off when you said yesterday that you were calling free speech an Achilles heel. Was, I think, the term you used, right?
Yeah, so what I said is free speech is a cherished value in our country. You cherish it, I cherish it. It is what makes us a free democracy and the ability for us to speak out against our government. It's what gives us free protest, and it's an incredible value. But there are people out there who are exploiting our very freedoms against it because they know we cherish this right of free speech. They bombard us with false claims. Knowing that we are
fair enough. Fair enough. There's been a lot of false claims back and forth. I was invited not to return to a job because I called out some false claims. So we all understand the danger of it, I guess. Do you understand, though, why so many conservatives are so concerned about this? Because there has been the silencing of speech by calling it disinformation, whether it was Hunter Biden's laptop, or whether it was the idea that if you got the COVID vaccine, you couldn't get COVID, and then you were labeled anti-science if you questioned that later turned out to be false. Do you understand why conservatives hear this and get so alarmed?
Well, I don't want to assume that anybody who watches your show is a monolith and that conservatives are one group. And I think that's one of the harms that we've done in society is to suggest that there are only two sides to every issue and there's an us versus them. Because, of course, real debate is more nuanced than that. But I don't think anyone ever said, if you get a COVID vaccine, you will never get COVID. I think what they said is this can reduce our likelihood of dying from COVID. I got the COVID vaccine. I bet you did too, because I wanted to protect myself and the rest of society. And as a result of that miracle, which, by the way, was all part of Donald Trump's warp speed program that got that vaccine created and out into the community, was a miracle. It was a fantastic feat of science. And so, those who are out there trying to suggest that it doesn't do what it does, I think is endangering public safety in a time that we need to be working together to solve problems.
Just a couple of things. Yes, did get the vaccine. President Biden did actually say, this is the Associated Press, so take what that means. President Joe Biden offered an absolute guarantee Wednesday that people who get their COVID-19 vaccines are completely protected from infection, sickness, and death from the coronavirus. And I just asked this question. Do you understand why conservatives, broadly speaking, conservatives over time have gotten scared that when they make they question things, they make statements, they have opinions, that the disinformation police, if you will, come down a lot harder on them than they do on the left?
Well, certainly we don't want anybody to be disinformation police. I cherish free speech rights. I work on a college campus where freedom of expression, freedom of speech, academic freedom are safeguarded, and those are very important things. And so I don't think it is so much the idea that anybody is being arrested for political speech, but I do think we have an obligation to call out that which we believe to be false and to share facts based on evidence. And I think that we do a disservice when we try to talk about conservatives versus progressives, or the red team versus the blue team, or Republicans versus Democrats. I'm old enough to remember a time, Leland, when we could have our own thoughts about different issues across the political spectrum. It wasn't all or nothing. And, now it seems that people care more about political purity and less about compromise. And I think that we need to look at hard facts so that we can reach agreement on things for compromise. For example, what's going on at the border right now? We hear a lot of political outcry on both sides of this issue. And I think that there are some who would rather have chaos at the border to divide us than for us to make hard decisions and compromises that it takes to have real solutions there. And so and we have to have.
I can't argue with that. We've said as much on the show. I think your point about political purity is a good one, and it's probably why America is where it is right now, which I think all of us, 80% now say they think it's going in the wrong direction. So there's a reason we all agree on that. Professor, thank you. Congratulations on the new book. I think you bring up a lot of good points. We appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Leland.
Next, illegal aliens busted for everything from drunk driving to assaulting cops to rape and murder come across the border every day and get released by the Border Patrol. Why America's borders rely on the honor system. All right, this is just some of the video we've collected over the years of illegal immigrants carrying out violent crimes in the United States. And of course, not every person entering the country is bad. In fact, most just want a better life. And immigration advocates will tell you, and it's true, that immigrants create and commit crimes at a lower rate than the rest of the population. But there are some pretty bad actors who come in. Customs and Border Protections, though, their hands are tied in terms of trying to stop those bad actors from coming into the United States because they're only able to track the criminal history of folks from a very few countries. The National Border Patrol Council estimates we only have access to the criminal history from 20 countries. That's about 10% of the countries worldwide. Mostly they're our friends rather than bad places like Venezuela and China and Iran. We've seen an increase in the number of people crossing from those dangerous countries. In fact, Venezuela ranks second for people coming to America, and Venezuela is now safer than ever. Well, safer than any time in the past 20 years. Crime there is way down. You can see 26.8 violent deaths, murders per 100,000. Now it's a third of that. And here's why. The criminal element has come north. President Biden, though, who has the option through unilateral executive orders to change what happens at the border, especially to people from countries where we can't tell if they have a criminal history or not, he could change how those people are handled at the border. Brandon Judd is here, president of the National Border Patrol Council. Brandon, good to see you. Congratulations. I know you did a lot of work on the visit today for former President Trump, and we're going to get to that in a minute. I'm curious, though, and because the murder of Laken Riley is really focusing us now on people who've come across who are bad actors and have done bad things. Outside of those 20 countries, most of whom are U.S. allies, do Border Patrol agents basically rely on the honor system of, hey, do you have a criminal history back home or not?
That's all we can rely on. Every single time that somebody comes into our custody, we fingerprint them. We look to see if they have a criminal record here. We're hoping that we have something on Interpol. We're hoping that other countries share something. But the vast majority of these individuals, we have to take them at face value based upon what they say, because the burden of proof is on us to show that they have a criminal history rather than on them.
All right, so help us understand, when people come across, they could have long criminal histories back home, Venezuela, Iran, Syria, Uzbekistan, wherever it is, Russia, China. And if they say to you, hey, I don't, nope, I've just been, coming here to come to America for a better life, so long as you don't have any individual hits on the Interpol fingerprints, then they get into the U.S.
Yeah, that's correct under current situations. So you got to understand that when we're not dealing with thousands upon thousands of people every single day, we have more time to do a little bit more research. But when you're dealing with 6,500, 7,500, 9,000 people, you don't have as much time. You have to get people out. We only have so much room to hold people in custody, and that's why we have to take them at face value. We've got to cut this down to give us more time to properly vet people. Otherwise, this is going to continue to happen.
All right. President Biden was also at the border today. No surprise or coincidence that the two of them were a couple of 100 miles apart. Here's President Biden offering an olive branch, if you will, to President Trump. Take a listen.
So here's what I would say to Mr. Trump. Instead of playing politics with this issue, instead of telling members of Congress to block this legislation, join me, or I'll join you in telling the Congress to pass this bipartisan border security bill. We can do it together.
The Border Patrol Council had supported the legislation. Totally agree it wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. Did you talk to President Trump about that at all today?
Yeah, just for a second, and I don't need to. I've spoken with him before. Look, he recognizes that from day one, he's going to be able to do a lot more than what this border bill would do. He also recognizes that if this border bill passes right now, and if he is elected, there's not going to be an appetite to get another border bill passed. What I have to look at is I have to say, there is a possibility, although I believe he's going to win, there is a possibility that he is not. And I have got to get what I can get when I can get that. And that's why I support that border bill. It is much better than what our current laws are. And that's how I weigh things. I look at things what is the status quo? What could we do with the border bill? And it is better. So I understand completely why he's doing what he's doing. He understands where I'm coming from. And that's what's really what I really like about him. He can work with people that have policy disagreements like myself. President Biden cannot. There's a reason that President Biden never talks to me, because he knows that I disagree with his policies and he doesn't want to hear what I have to say.
All right. Brandon, thank you very much. Congratulations on as I know, what was a successful visit in your guys' mind. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Coming up next, boys used to rebel against their parents by growing their hair long. I never did that. But now they're rebelling by becoming more